St. Mark's is, in my opinion, the most photogenic lighthouse in Florida. It is a classic Winslow Lewis structure, the only one in Florida with an attached house, and because it sits in the middle of a wildlife refuge, it is unspoiled. Other than the paved road leading to it, there are no other signs of civilization. FLA has helped the preservation of this historic lighthouse in several ways, including underwriting the engineering study on which all the preservation and restoration efforts are based. FLA recently awarded a grant to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Friends of St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge to help update their museum exhibits. Robin Will is a supervisory refuge ranger with the St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge.
This first room that you're in would be welcoming our visitors. It's the foyer, and we have decorated it with some furniture back to the 1930s, which is when the last lighthouse keeper family was here, the Gresham family. And we've had some beautiful exhibits put in that are some homemade, but we have lovely timeline exhibits that were done by Creative Pool in Tallahassee that show the 200+ years this lighthouse history has lived. And this grand old dame of a lighthouse has been around for a long time, and she has weathered hurricanes and storms and the Civil War and all kinds of battles out in the bay. Even pirates have been anchored off the shore of the St. Mark's Lighthouse. So some of the interesting stories are depicted on the timeline, and these keepers had to live in very primitive conditions. The only supplies they could get were the boats that came by, and if a storm interrupted the supply boats, then Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper did not have any flour or sugar to offer her family. So they lived off the land, they hunted geese and fished and scalloped and took what they could from the animals that live on what is now the wildlife refuge. And now I'd like to take you into our second room. This is sort of our Families of the Lighthouse Keepers room. And you've got some lovely exhibits talking about every keeper that was working here at the St. Mark's Lighthouse. Over here we have the women who kept the light, and we did have two ladies that were married to lighthouse keepers who both passed away in the line of duty, and they took over and ran the light. One lady actually lost all her belongings in a terrible storm, and the U.S. government would not reimburse her. It was a very sad story. So the people that ran this light, not just the men, but the women and the children, really had to endure some pretty rough situations. Again, the room is decorated with mementos as well as photographs of the beautiful ladies that kept the light and some of the family mementos. This was the parents' bedroom back in the day. It actually had a closet, and it actually had a medicine cabinet where the little lighthouse miniatures are sitting. And so this was a nice room for mom and dad back in the day. And now we come into a beautiful room talking about the history of this area that impacted the lighthouse as well as the St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge. Behind me is a wonderful exhibit about the Civil War. We were very actively positioned as a lighthouse along the Gulf Coast. There were Union blockades out in the bay that kept any materials from going out from the local towns. There were salt works being built to make sea salt because those families were exempt from military service. There was a battle that was launched at the end of the war in March when the Union troops landed at the lighthouse and marched to a little community called Natural Bridge and tried to fight off, or tried to get Tallahassee, the only capital east of the Mississippi that was not captured by Union troops. And that was because of that little skirmish at Natural Bridge. So we do commemorate that with this exhibit. And then over here is a wonderful story of one of the few African-American camps during the Civilian Conservation Corps, BF1, and it was located at the St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge, and these gentlemen literally built the refuge in the 1930s. St. Mark's was established in 1931, and the Civilian Conservation Corps worked on the refuge from 1934 until the 1940s. And these gentlemen only got $30 a month, and $25 of that went home to their families. So everything else they had to make do with here at the camp. They were fed, but they built everything on the refuge, including furniture and the levees and the lighthouse road behind me. So the refuge is definitely intertwined in the amazing history of the St. Mark's Lighthouse. Please come visit us soon. The St. Mark's Lighthouse is a beloved landmark and icon for our local community. Here in Wakulla County, mariners have counted on that beacon for centuries. So it wasn't just the love of the lighthouse and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to preserve it, but we worked actively with private and public partnerships and the local community to restore it. We are so grateful for the partnership with the Friends of the St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge and the Florida Lighthouse Association that worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to make this beautiful place a reality.